Thank you. What a joy to be with you guys, to be speaking at a seminary at all, someone who doesn't have any formal theological training. They're so sweet or crazy to roll me out even multiple times. And first time as a northerner, as a Yankee, as someone who was not raised in a Baptist church, to be actually at a Baptist seminary. This really is my first time, and I'm deeply honored, Dr. Blazing, to you, Dr. Patterson, and your team, and of course to the Chosen People Ministries team. My father became a follower of Jesus. He was from an Orthodox Jewish background, raised Orthodox Jewish in Brooklyn, first generation American. His parents and grandparents escaped out of anti-Semitic Tsarist Russia. So here's my father, first generation American, Orthodox Jew, comes to faith in Yeshua. Right? Thinks he's the first Jew since the Apostle Paul who believes this stuff. Never heard of a Jewish person who believed in Yeshua, Jesus. Never met a person who like this. And in 1973, as you saw, there really weren't that many. But one of the things I think is interesting, and even though it's not my topic, I'm going to take a moment to say, a lot of Gentiles, probably not you, because I can see the flavor. Most of you have gone to Israel. 97% of evangelicals have never been to Israel. So the fact that most of you have means you're outliers, good ones. But a lot of Gentiles think, oh, you Jews, you think you're so special. You're the chosen people, right? And most of us Jews, we don't even want to be chosen. I mean, really, how has that worked out well for us? If you think about it, you're laughing because you're a Gentile, but the Pharaoh chose us. Stalin chose us, Hitler chose us, the Ayatollahs chose us, all the radical Islamic jihadists chose us. Like, Lord, choose somebody else. We're totally fine with that. Like, why, really? One of my favorite cartoons in life has been the Far Side cartoons, Gary Larson, Canadian cartoonist. And you may remember those from the 80s and whatever. Well, my favorite is a cartoon, that one panel, little funny animals, two deer standing in the forest. One of the deer has a bullseye on its chest, right? And the deer without the bullseye says to the deer with the bullseye, "Bummer of a birthmark, Hal." And that's what it feels like to be Jewish in this world, okay? You wake up in the morning and you have this bullseye on your chest. Before you've even done anything right or wrong. There are people who want to hate you. There are people who want to kill you. And the word that continues to come up throughout all of the Bible and all of history up to today is the word annihilate. Okay? Why do people want to annihilate us? I mean, we're just a sliver of a percentage of the entire population. I mean, what is it that engenders this intense hatred up to and including wanting to wipe us out as a people? So this is one of those pieces that for Jewish people, we struggle with. And often you see in the scriptures, Jewish people wanting to be like the nations. We want a king like the nations have. We don't want to be different. We don't want to be set apart by God. We instinctively want to be like the nations. But that's because we're resisting God's plan and purpose for us. Is that we're not more special. So sometimes we compensate by how hated we are by trying to feel like we're more special than anyone else. So the chosen people idea is, because we're better than anyone else. But Deuteronomy chapter 9, for example, tells us 3 times God says, I didn't choose you because you are more righteous than anyone else. And he reinforces it 3 times to make it clear we are not more righteous. God just sovereignly decided to choose this group of people, this ethnic group of people, to reveal himself and his plan to Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob and so forth, to reveal himself and his plan to us, and his hope is through us, that we would not only know God, the true God of the universe, but we would make him known to others. We would make him known to the nations. Right? This is why the Lord, the Father, says to the Son, to the Messiah in Isaiah 49, it's too small a thing that you should only save the tribes of Judah the tribes of Israel. There's too small a thing. I also want you to be a light to the nations and bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. And so God wants to bring, as we come to know Messiah, he wants us to then make him known to everyone else. And this is one of the great tensions for Jewish people. We resist God's plan. We resist being chosen by him. Most Jews, when you poll American Jews, they will not tell you they are chosen. They don't believe in the concept of being chosen, mostly. And they don't even believe, most of them, that God has given us a land. So they've essentially rejected the Abrahamic covenant. We get frustrated with supersessionists, but our own team struggles with this. And it's a defensive posture, and it's because I don't want to sound like I have some special blessing. Because most of us don't even understand it. We haven't experienced it because we're resisting it. And we also say, well, again, how has that chosen people thing worked well for us? I mean, I walk down the street, someone hates me just because I'm Jewish. And this brings us to this topic, which is the biblical kingdom or the Islamic caliphate. We're going to look at the differences and the similarities, actually, between biblical eschatology and Islamic eschatology. And the reason I wanted to start this way was because we have to understand that Islam is sort of the latest incarnation of a movement which, by and large, but not entirely, certainly the radical elements, hate the Jewish people and seek our annihilation. Okay? Now, I want to start out by saying the vast majority of Muslims do not seek violence. Over the last many decades, certainly since 9/11, you've seen just numerous surveys from Gallup, from the Pew Research Organization and others, where they're just asking Muslims in many Muslim majority countries, Muslim minority countries, from all kinds of angles, asking a wide range of questions, trying to understand what Muslims think about a whole range of things. And one of the objectives is try to understand if they support violence. And I've studied so much of this data over the years, and what I can tell you in summary is about 90% of Muslims do not support the use of violence to achieve their religious or political objectives. About 90%. So you really can say that the vast majority of Muslims are not a threat to us, and we have to, as evangelicals, as Messianic Jews, we have to keep this thing in perspective. We don't want to be guilty of casting aspersions on 1.6 billion people. It just isn't accurate. The vast majority have no violent intentions. Now, that being said, the data is pretty consistent. Between 7 and 10% of Muslims worldwide do support violence to achieve their objectives. And those questions are asked in a variety of different ways. Do you support the use of suicide bombers to, whatever? Sometimes, ever, never, rarely, and you get the 7 to 10% range of people in various countries. Some countries are higher. Obviously, some countries are lower. Some countries, like Jordan, you had more than 30% of Jordanians used to support the use of suicide bombers. Then suicide bombers began to attack Jordanians. They would hit a series of hotels, Western hotels, where largely Westerners were attending, but Jordanians were having weddings in these hotels, and these radicals would blow themselves up, and the whole concept of suicide bombing suddenly became personal. And you watch those numbers plummet into the low to mid single digits. Okay? But if you ask a whole variety of other questions, at the time, do you approve or disapprove of Osama bin Laden? and what he's doing with Al-Qaeda? Do you support the Islamic State and their activities to build a caliphate and attack infidels? And you can just imagine this wide range of questions. And what you find is between 7 and 10% pretty consistently support this radicalism, this use of violence, but 90% do not. So, on the one hand, this is good. This is why you used to have President George W. Bush say Islam is a peaceful religion. It's a religion of peace. This is why you'd have President Obama saying this. Why? And I don't want to get into the politics. I'm giving you a Republican and a Democrat to say both have said this. Now, often I hear evangelicals, immediately, well, that's ridiculous. Obviously, well, okay, hold on a second. From a practical perspective, if 90% of a religious group do not support violence, then isn't it overreaching to say Islam is a religion of jihad, of violence? So you understand at least the basis for why they're saying that. Now, you can get into a theological argument. Are the 90% following true Islam? Well, that's a whole internal discussion within Islam. And that is what's happening. The ISIS leaders, Al-Qaeda leaders, they are arguing from the text of the Quran that no, the moderates are not being true to the text. Now, where is this contradiction? So I wrote a book 10 years ago now almost called Inside the Revolution. And there was the whole first third of the book is looking at the radicals. Okay, and these are, and I would define a radical as in this case, a radical Muslim, and more precisely, let me be clear, as a radical Islamist. That it's not they're using religion to accomplish a political Islamist objective. They want to kick the Americans out of this place or that. They want to kick Israel out of the land. They want to change a policy, what have you. So, and Islamism is the use of the religion of Islam to accomplish political objectives. Okay, so that's a technical term, but radical Islamism. Okay, now, what is that? Again, you've heard me say it several times, but I want to sort of define it. It's the use of violence to achieve a political objective. Okay, that's radical Islam. Now, 7 to 10% would say yes, I'm willing to. I support that at times or sometimes all the time. But 90% do not. Okay, now, the problem with saying that, okay, the vast majority of Muslims in the world are not radicals, it's true, but it also overlooks the fact that 10% of 1.6 billion people is 160 million people, right? Now, if you were to gather all of the radical Islamists into one country, the Islamic Republic of Radicalstan, this would be the 9th largest country on the planet. Okay, this would be larger than Russia. This would be half the population of the United States. So what you have is a little schizophrenic thinking. On the one hand, you have people saying, oh, no, Islam is a peaceful religion. We really have no threat. And now we understand the basis of that, 90%. But then you say, no, it's a super big threat, and we have to take measures to protect ourselves. And you would have to say, with 160 million people in this camp, that would be true. You would have to protect yourselves. Now, again, clarification. 160 million does not mean that every single one of them will engage in violence. It means that they've identified themselves as someone willing to support violence. So this is the pool from which the actual practitioners of radical Islamism, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, so Hamas and so forth, this is who they're recruiting from. People who are inclined to support this. And so this is where they're getting their money from. This is where they're getting, material support. This is where they're getting logistical support. And this is where they're recruiting people to say, let's train you to put into practice what you believe. And that's a big pool. Some of us, we think to ourselves, oh my gosh, we've been at war in Afghanistan since 2001, since December of 2001. We've had boots on the ground. We've been training Afghan warriors. We've had NATO there Where are all these people coming from? I mean, how many do you have to arrest or kill? And it just keeps happening. That's because you're drawing from a pool of 160 million people. It's a never-ending reserve. If the Islamists can keep finding ways to activate, recruit, mobilize, train, and deploy people from that world. So that's a huge problem. Now, there's a subset of radical Islamism, which I call apocalyptic Islam. Okay? You could call it apocalyptic Islamism, but I think in this case it's actually apocalyptic Islam. What does that mean? So if radical Islam is trying to use violence to achieve a political objective, drive the Americans out of some place or another, drive the Israelis and the Jews out of the region, and so forth, change a policy, catch attention, apocalyptic Muslims are using violence to bring about the end of society, of the world as we've known it. They actually have end times objectives. They believe that if you kill enough people, if you can create chaos and carnage and ultimately genocide, this will force the hand of Allah. This will accelerate or hasten the coming of the promised one to establish a kingdom, or in their parlance, a caliphate, starting in the Middle East, but extending over the entire globe. Okay? So this is an entirely different objective. Right? This isn't trying to take out an embassy or an aid worker or capture a missionary and try to change policy. This is trying to end the world and usher in global Sharia law, global Islam, in which everyone has to bow to this virulent form of Islam or Islamism, and if not, you're enslaved or you're killed. This is a far more dangerous thing, but this is a subset. Every apocalyptic Muslim is certainly a radical, but not every radical is apocalyptic. Are we tracking? So here's an example. So the list of groups that would be radicals, but not apocalyptic. This would be the Taliban in Afghanistan. This would be the Muslim Brotherhood, started in Egypt, but spreading throughout the region. This would be Hamas, primarily in Gaza, but trying to penetrate the West Bank. And Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt. This is Al-Qaeda, originally Saudi-based, Afghan-based, and spreading and ebbing and flowing. Many of us have not heard much from Al-Qaeda of late, but I can tell you from talking to all the experts, they are there and they are letting ISIS do their thing, and they are ready to surge back into the gaps as soon as they can. So there's a wide list, a long list of radicals who aren't apocalyptic, but they're bad. I mean, I'm not softening how, who have we mostly been engaged with? We've been engaged with radicals. But there are the apocalypticists. So this is really, we are now at a moment in history, rare, I think unique, where we have not just one state on the planet, but two whose leaders are driven by apocalyptic Islam, by apocalyptic Islamic eschatology. A deep, deep belief that the end has come, and that they can take human action to bring it all to its summation, to its consummation. Okay? Now, these two states are the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Islamic State. Okay? These are the two. Now, ISIS, Islamic State, is on the run. It's defensive, it's losing ground, and we've seen this radical is probably the wrong word, but dramatic acceleration. I would say impressive acceleration under the new U.S. administration to really go after ISIS in a way that is unlike the last several years. And that's why you're seeing city after city after city, ISIS is losing control and the Iraqi government, this is primarily in Iraq, is retaking control with the coalition allies. And I think we're just days away, maybe weeks away, but really re-securing Iraq, which had been pretty secure pre-December 2011 when the decision was made in Washington to withdraw all U.S. forces. At that point, it created a huge vacuum into which ISIS surged. And now we've been fighting 6 years, and now we're at the point where Iraq is just about to be, I think you could almost say, formally liberated again. Many challenges to remain. This discussion isn't about how do we stabilize Iraq, but I'm just saying the caliphate that ISIS established and declared was first in Iraq, right? ISIS was originally Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And then they morphed into something new. They morphed into the Islamic State of Iraq. Then they decided to add Syria to the mix. They saw the civil war going on in Syria, and they thought, there's a chance to bring down the Assad government, which is, Assad's a Muslim, but he is not devout in any way. He's certainly not apocalyptic. So we could bring him down, and we could add Syria into the mix, which in the Islamic writings, the teachings of Muhammad and his followers, Syria is a big part of the prize. So this became the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. That's what we kind of began to think of as ISIS. What they really meant was the Islamic State of Iraq, so ISI, and Al-Sham. That's really where the S from ISIS comes from, Al-Sham. You're like, okay, I don't get that. Al-Sham is what the French would say is the Levant. You're like, that's not helping me. Okay. The Levant is a footprint of territory that includes Lebanon, Syria, the Holy Land, certainly Israel, and Jordan, and Iraq. So that would be widely considered the Levant, with a little bit of margins in several directions. So in Arabic, it would be the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham, meaning definitely Syria, but not limited to Syria. The goals were to bring down King Abdullah in Jordan, bring down the government in Lebanon, certainly overtake and kill all the Jews in Israel, and so forth, and of course Iraq as well. So that's, and then they just decided, forget even defining it. It's just the Islamic State. We're planting the flag. We're the caliphate, and part of their objective was, because of their Islamic apocalyptic eschatology, they believe that what you're doing is you're establishing the caliphate here in this space, and then you're going to slaughter as many people as you can. You're creating genocidal conditions, killing primarily Christians and Jews. There weren't that many Jews there, so they would get to us later. But killing Christians, slaughtering Christians, breaking the cross, that was their term, and then killing every Muslim that got in their way that didn't agree with them. Okay, just being a Muslim was not enough. You had to buy into their apocalyptic theology and eschatology. And then, of course, other groups like Yazidis and others, the Kurds, they would be massacred also. So where we are today is that half the caliphate in the last year or so has been liberated. Or from their perspective, it has collapsed. And now they're on the defense in Syria. And of course, the capital, the current capital of ISIS, or Islamic State, is Raqqa in the western third of Syria, okay, along the river. So Raqqa has been the center, it's been the stronghold, the capital, and yet the coalition forces are working with Syrian rebels to liberate Raqqa. It's been a ferocious battle. I mean, ISIS, for whatever else you say about these people are fighting to the bitter, deadly end. And because they believe this is it. These are the ultimate battles. They are prophetic battles. This is not just about gaining territory or political advantage. This is about the end of the world as we know it. The end of Christendom, eventually the end of Judaism, the end of apostate Islam, and the rise of the caliphate. Now, within that world, the leaders of ISIS, are of course led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Now, that's not his real name. This is a name that you take to yourself, in their view, when you want to be the caliph or the king of this kingdom, okay, this caliphate. Now, you're a temporary king, or caliph, because what you're trying to do is be a temporary steward of the caliphate until the Mahdi comes. M-A-H-D-I, the Mahdi. The Mahdi is the promised one. He is, to Apocalyptic Islam, what Jesus is to us, the one who will come and conquer the entire world and make it right and bring justice and peace and establish the kingdom over the entire planet. That's the caliph. But the caliph will not be the temporary human steward. It will be this Mahdi, okay? Jesus, in their view, in their eschatology, Jesus does come back. But he comes back as the deputy to the Mahdi. He comes as the lieutenant. Now, some of the language in English gets a little confused, so we would think of the Mahdi as the Messiah, because from our minds, Messiah is Mashiach, the anointed one, that's the king. But their view, see, Muhammad conceded in the Quran that Jesus, Isa, is the Messiah. He concedes that part, but he concedes it without accepting that he's the Son of God, and therefore he's not God, he's not divine. He's a Messiah, but he's not the King of the universe. Okay? Now, that's flawed and obviously heretical, but Peter made the same mistake, by the way, just for a moment. Not to equate Peter to Muslims, but I'm just for a moment. Peter at Caesarea Philippi is asked, along with the other disciples, right? Yeshua says, "Who do men say that I am?" And they give their various responses. "Well, who do you say that I am?" And Peter hits the bullseye, right? He says, "You're the Messiah, you're the Son of God." He does get the Son of God language in there. And Yeshua says to him, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, Peter, but my Father in heaven." In other words, not only are you right, but you wouldn't have figured this out, and especially you, Peter, because, whatever. Not the sharpest knife in our drawer, but God loves you, he's got a plan for you, he's going to use you, but let's just keep things in perspective. Whatever. He doesn't actually say that, of course. He doesn't need to, but we see it. But, they're up on the Mount of Transfiguration. They're seeing Yeshua glorified. They're seeing Moses and Elijah. He's like, "This is great. We should build tents." No, just shuck it, Bavakasha. Just be quiet. Just don't say anything. I know you just can't help yourself, but just don't do it. I mean, nobody actually says that to him, but they should have. So anyway, but Peter, having just called Yeshua the Messiah and the Son of God, then hears Yeshua tell him, "Okay, now here's the plan. We go to Jerusalem, I'm arrested, I'm tortured, I'm killed. Don't worry, I'll rise again." And what does Peter do? He physically grabs Yeshua and he pulls him aside and he rebukes him. "Don't talk like that. That's ridiculous." I'm paraphrasing, but the image is of, "You've got to be kidding. Have you lost your mind? That's not going to happen. Don't talk that way." Now think about it. When you see Yeshua, do you plan to pull him aside and tell him he's doing things wrong? That is astonishing. But it means that while the words were coming out and the beginning of the revelation of who Yeshua is and was and will be was starting to dawn on Peter, he did not understand what he was saying. He understood that he was the Messiah, the king that was coming, the promised one, but he did not understand that he was talking to the personification of God and truth. He did not understand that the Word had become flesh and dwelt among him, that this was the divine being in the flesh, and that he was really crossing a line. And Satan was speaking through him, as we know from the dialogue. But what was happening? Why did Peter respond this way? It wasn't just Peter's way to speak before he thought. That was certainly true. But what did he think? What he thought was, this is the next presidential candidate, and this guy's going to win. And I'm on the team. I'm on the inner circle. He's told me that he is, in fact, who I hoped he'd be, the candidate who's going to set us free from the Romans, and he's going to reestablish the state of Israel, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm right next to him. I'm on the team. I'm an advisor to him. Okay? Now you have to understand, I'm a failed political consultant. So I spent 10 years in Washington, 25 years in Washington, but the first 10 of the years was helping people lose their elections. That wasn't my intent, clearly. I wanted them to win, but they didn't, time after time after time. So I remember, after multiple failures, getting hired by then former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He'd been Prime Minister from 1996 to 1999, and it was now 2000. He believed the winds were beginning to change. The people were beginning to think, maybe we made a mistake firing Netanyahu. Maybe we need to bring him back. He hired a team of American political consultants to augment his Israeli team. I was the junior member of that team. I got interviewed by him, hired by him, and we were going to be deployed in Israel soon as the English language press secretary. They'd move me and my family over there. I was excited because his poll numbers were rising. At one point, he was 22 points ahead of Barack. Now, just so you know, that was 2000. It took him 9 more years to come back. Okay, I played no useful role. The whole thing fell apart within a few months, and I was back out on the street as a failure. But just try to imagine my feeling of, finally, man, I'm on a winning team. This is exciting. This guy is going to the top. The polls are rising. I'm not playing much of a role, but it's fun to do whatever I can to be helpful, and here we go. This is going to be fun. So I identify with Peter. The challenge was not just Peter. James and John were actually vying for cabinet positions. Okay? And their mother was getting into the process. I mean, this is a very Jewish context. I mean, everybody who has a Jewish mother knows how this works. It's possible that they deployed her on their behalf, but it's equally possible she deployed herself and they were mortified. I don't know which one, but either way, these guys saw Jesus as the king, as the liberator, but in a very temporal sense. They did not understand the prophecies. They didn't understand the concept of the suffering servant, that Yeshua was going to have to suffer and die for the nation and only later come back and establish himself as the king, not only of Israel, but of the world, and to make all things right and usher in the very kingdom that Dr. Blazing laid out so well for us earlier today. So this flawed understanding of who Jesus is as deep as the disciples themselves, okay? Now, when you look at Muhammad in the 7th century, now you have someone who isn't close to Jesus. He doesn't know the word of God well, but he knows some of it. He knows enough of it to get himself in trouble, right? He thinks that Ishmael was the one that Abraham tried to sacrifice. He's got a lot of twists and turns in the story. But he's convinced that Jesus is the Messiah, that he's just not God, right? And that he's that he's born of a virgin, that he does miracles, that he is the Word of God, that people should read the Injil. They should read the New Testament as well as the Torah. These are the things that are said in the Quran. But of course, Satan, as he's giving these visions and dreams to Muhammad in the cave and having him write these things down, he's taking biblical theology and, like Satan does, he's twisting it to downgrade the role of Jesus, to sideline him, and to upgrade his own role, okay? And then thus to deceive billions of people over time. So let's take a pause for a second. let's take an Etch-a-Sketch and shake it and sort of go, okay, what do we know so far? What have we said so far? I'm not going to recap all of it, but here's a few key pieces to process. All Muslims who are devout believe that we are living in the end of days. They believe that there are signs, these wars in the region, the economic upheaval, all these things. They believe these are signs that the Mahdi is coming. They all believe the Mahdi is coming. Many believe he's coming in their lifetime. They believe that Jesus is coming, and that he's coming, maybe, and very likely in their lifetime. They of course, do not believe that he's the Messiah, or they believe he's the Messiah, but that he's not the king, he's not the top guy, that he's the deputy. They believe that apocalyptic wars will ensue as we get closer to these final moments, and they believe they're supposed to live differently in light of these truths. Now, we would say that's a similarity with almost every single piece. We are living in the last days. Jesus is coming back. And as an aside, I find it fascinating that much of the church doesn't talk about Jesus returning, but the Muslims do. And that Satan, as he was cooking up a new, deceptive religion, thought, well, obviously Jesus is coming back. I'm going to have to write that into the story. But he's not God, and he's not going to be the king, and he's not going to be in charge. I will be, so we'll make him the deputy. Yes, he's coming, and we'll tell, because that's obvious, and so, but he's coming as the deputy. He's in a subordinate role. I just find that fascinating. So much of the church doesn't teach about the second coming of Jesus, except, 1.6 billion Muslims believe this. How come the church doesn't believe this? It is astonishing to me, but that's a side point. Important, actually, point, but a side point. So again, these things, the ancient prophecies in our holy books give us signs that will indicate when the end of days will come, that we're in fact in those end of days, we're seeing those signs, and the Messiah is coming to earth, and very soon, and that whoever we believe is our top person that's coming, us, Jesus, them, Mahdi, will come, and he will establish a global kingdom. They call it a caliphate. It will bring justice and universe, and everyone will follow that king in the last days. And that we must live differently in light of this. And there's a final judgment to come. So we will be held to account with what we believe. So those are the main similarities. And you hear in that some of the differences, of course. One of them, of course, you have to hate Jews and destroy Israel. We believe you're supposed to love Jews and encourage the rebirth and growth of Israel. We believe the final battles in history, according to the Bible, will be at Megiddo. We call it Har Megiddo or Armageddon, and of course at Jerusalem. They believe the final battles will include Jerusalem, but the main ones are in Dabiq, a little tiny town in Syria, and in a place called Kufa in Iraq. Their main focus is Mecca. Our main focus is Jerusalem. We believe that if you don't convert and follow Yeshua as your Savior, that you will face eternal judgment. But they believe that if you don't convert in front of them, that their responsibility is to kill you. We believe that Matthew 24:14 tells us that this gospel of the kingdom, this good news that Yeshua is the king and he's bringing a kingdom and we can be part of it forever and ever, but this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end shall come. Okay? So we believe that the goal is to try to save as many people as possible, and then the end will come. The apocalyptic Muslims, believe you're trying to kill as many people as possible, and this will trigger the end and the establishment of the caliphate. We know, of course, that the Bible is the inspired word of God, and these are true prophecies, and of course, Islam is very sadly and tragically a collection of false prophecies pointing in the wrong direction. So these are some of the main differences. I believe it's important that we understand biblical eschatology, because you've got a lot of people who are being driven in the Middle East by a false eschatology. And now, one last piece, and then I think we'll open up for some questions, and that is this. ISIS, or Islamic State, this is a Sunni version of this apocalyptic eschatology, right? And Iran is a Shia Muslim version. Now, again, you're like, I actually don't know much about the difference between Shia and Sunni. Let me give you the very short version. I mean, like in a sentence or two. Sunni Muslims believe that as Muhammad died, that the authority to continue teaching and discipling and propagating Islam, that authority fell to the disciples that were immediately around Muhammad. Okay? The Shias believe that no, the authority has to stay in the bloodline. It has to be connected to a descendant, a family member of Muhammad. Now, Ali becomes, in the Shia world, the first imam, meaning the first one that received the authority to govern and lead Islam after Muhammad. And now he was part of the bloodline, but he also married into the bloodline because he married the daughter of Muhammad, one of them. So that makes him, doubly bloodline blessed, I guess, from their perspective. So that's the belief in Shia Islam. Now, Shia Islam is only about 20% or so of the Islamic world, and the Sunnis are about 80%. So the Shias believe that there was a first imam, and then when he died, this authority passed on up to the 12th imam. Okay? Imam is like a high Islamic cleric, and that I-M-A-M, imam. So the 12th imam was, because of a bloodline descendancy, he was a young boy. And bad guys came to kill him because he was going to be the next caliph. He was going to be the next head of Islam, and they were coming to kill him, says one of the stories of the history. And so one version says that his mother set him in a well to hide him, and then when the bad guys left and she went to get him, he disappeared, never to be found again. Others say he just disappeared, and others said he ran away and disappeared. Whatever version, what developed was a belief that the 12th imam, that person, is the last of the imam, and he will come, and he's the Mahdi. And so, whereas the Sunnis would say, yes, the Mahdi is coming, and he will rule the world, the Shias say, yes, he's coming, and the 12th imam is he. Okay? So that's a little breakdown on that. So those are two different views. And the last piece of that is this, and then we'll go to questions. The Sunni ISIS version, and again, most Sunnis don't believe the apocalyptic elements of it. They're not trying to bring about jihad or genocide, but ISIS is. But ISIS believes, hey, you can build a caliphate right now. You got a sword, you got an AK-7, you can start committing genocide today. You do not need to wait. You do not need to collect $200. You can do this right now. And so that's what they've been trying to do. Now that they're losing ground, that's good because they're losing the caliphate, but it's not good because a lot of them are redeploying and they're planning to start killing us in the United States and Europe and elsewhere. But that's the ISIS version. The key thing you have to understand is the leadership in Iran, not the nation of Iran, but the leadership in Iran, they are apocalyptic Muslims under the Shia version, but they're like, no, we're not going to go kill a few thousand or tens of thousands now. If the West is going to give us a nuclear deal, $100 billion in cash, remove all our sanctions, and in 10 to 15 years, remove all legal restrictions to our nuclear and ballistic missile industries, we will take that. We have time to wait. And when we build nuclear warheads and the missiles to deliver them, we will then be able to kill, in a matter of minutes, millions of people. I mean, literally, Iran, once they're ready, with one or two weapons, could do in 6 minutes what it took Adolf Hitler about 6 years to do, and that is to kill 6 million Jews. So they're just pacing themselves. They're just taking a little bit longer view so that when they're ready, they're really ready. And I think as we understand missions in the Middle East and to Muslims, we need to understand what they believe and what they don't believe. And also it reminds us, if there's other people driven to crazy and bizarre lengths that they will go in their lives by their kingdom that's coming, why are we not exactly gripped by, much less teaching, the fact that we've got this wonderful kingdom, that we have the truth, and that we should be sharing what John the Baptist taught right from the first sentence. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. This is what Jesus taught. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. This is what Jesus said when he said, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end shall come. And I would leave you with this question. Are we just preaching the gospel, or are we really preaching the gospel of the kingdom to the whole world? Amen.
Let's sit down. Let's give some other people a chance too. We're going to take about 7-8 minutes for questions. Could I have one of the CPM staff help me with the other mic, please? Don't all come at once. Thank you, Joe. I wanted to make mention, there are workshops this afternoon, and some of you indicated which ones you would be going to. Workshop number 1 on Jewish evangelism will be in room 101. So according to my number, 70 of you signed up for that. Workshop number 2, the impact of replacement theology on Jewish ministries, will be in room 250, directly above us. So you have to take the steps upstairs. And workshop number 3, preaching with Jewish people in mind, will be right next door in room 152. And those workshops, I believe, are at, at 3 o'clock. Yes? Okay. And so what we're going to be doing now is taking questions. Then we're going to be breaking for book signing. So in other words, buy your books and find one of the authors. We have all 3 of Joel's last series of novels, and I'm sure Joel will be happy to sign those. Sure. And there's others of us who have books that we've written, so you can buy the books and track us down. But let's try to get some other people, okay? In the back over there, please. Hey, let me give you the mic.
The Muslims that are coming to the United States and don't want to assimilate, are they declaring jihad against us by doing that?
I don't know that that's fair. I mean, I think if you're a Muslim coming here, look. Let's start from the negative side. There are 1,000 FBI open investigations right now into ISIS operatives in the United States. These are investigations going on in all 50 states. So it's a serious problem. And it's not just ISIS, but just using that as an example. But I believe the vast majority of Muslims that are coming to the United States are coming because this is because there's freedom here. If you're a Muslim, whatever you believe about Islam, most of the countries that you would be coming from are horribly oppressive. And unless you're an oil baron, a sheik over there, how do you make a living? How do you put your kids in good schools? There's a lot of opportunity here for the same reasons that Jewish people came here and that Mexican people come here and other people come here. They want opportunity primarily. They're not trying to cause a problem. Some are, but the vast majority are coming for the very opportunity that's the Statue of Liberty. So, and now the other side is, why don't they assimilate? Well, there's multiple reasons, and some can be negative, and they're planning something or whatever. But often it's because they don't feel welcome. They do have the opportunity to get a job, and they have legal rights, and they have opportunities, economic opportunities, education opportunities. But, most Muslims never meet a Christian. And this is a problem, that we actually have the nations, not just Muslims, but all kinds of people in our country, and the church is not welcoming them. We were just with, the other night, a Muslim woman from Kuwait who, when her country, she happened to be on vacation with her family in the United States in 1990 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and began to rape and pillage her country, so they couldn't go back. She lived here, I think, she said like 10 years. No Christian ever showed her kindness, invited her to do anything, invited her to church, nothing. Now, by God's grace, the Lord eventually reached her by someone who did cross that border, the cultural barrier, and said, I just want to be your friend. And this led to conversations. This led to her coming to faith. And now she wants to go love Holocaust victims and survivors with Chosen People ministry. She's in full-time ministry now. What a great story. But what the first part of the story, not so great. People assumed things about her, didn't show her any love or kindness. So that's really what the church's obligation is to love the foreigner, love our neighbor. And if you consider it, well, she's not a neighbor, she's an enemy. Well, then quote Jesus saying, love your enemy. I mean, that's our job. If they kill you, well, I'll see you in heaven. But in the meantime, most of them won't, and so we should be loving them and reaching them with the gospel. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Dr. Rosenberg,
I'm not a doctor, and nor do I know the name Rosenberg. It would seem like it would go together, but
Okay.
I have no letters after my name unless you say F from my political career. So just so you know.
Yeah. So I just curious, when more and more traditional Jewish people in the Middle East come to the faith of Christ, do they have some different perspectives with the Western church's theology or traditions? Something like the Lord's Supper, baptism, the celebration of Christmas, Easter, something like that.
The question is, when Jewish people in Israel come to faith in Yeshua, do they struggle with sort of Western Christian tradition? Many do. And you saw from Dr. Soref's presentation that many are trying to figure out their Jewish identity, and they don't really want to be part of the church in terms of all those Western traditions and practice because of all the heritage and bad history that comes with it. Theologically, yes, they're part of the church, but they don't want to identify. Many. However, many secular Israelis are totally interested. Like, let me give you an example. So we make Aliyah, we move to Israel. We like Christmas. Most Israelis don't celebrate Christmas. It's not in the Bible. You say, yes, it is. No, it's not. The birth of Jesus is. Christmas isn't. The tree, not so much. The lights, really, no. So the presents, yes, okay. But we like it. It's part, and we realize, okay, that's part of our tradition. We don't want to offend our Messianic brothers and sisters, and we don't want to offend our whole neighborhood. We just got here. Like, what should we do? So our next door neighbors are Erez Soref and his family. literally right next door. You throw a rock. Well, we don't have a rock, an orange, and you'd reach them. So Erez and his wife Cece and my wife Lynn and I, we go out for a double date, and we say, so Christmas is coming. Like, we don't want to offend anybody, but we have these traditions. We like to have Christmas parties and tree, and we like to have cookie decorating contests, and we do white elephant gift exchanges, and it's all. And they were interested because they don't do that, and we said, so that won't fly here, will it? They said, no, actually. So many secular Israelis they watched Home Alone. They know about Christmas, right? And they're kind of curious. It's festive. They like it. So, no, they wouldn't do it religiously, but they said, we have an idea. We think you should have a Christmas party. Do it exactly the way you do it, and then let's read from Isaiah 9 in Hebrew. Like, for unto us a child is born, a son is given. Let's read the story. Let's go to Micah 5 and just read the prophecies. The Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. And then we'll read how about if we read Luke 2 in Hebrew, native Israelis reading it. So just, as sort of part of, right before you exchange the gifts. So, they have to sort of stay for that. So we said, that'd be fun. So we did that. And the Jewish National Fund, they're growing Christmas trees. They actually literally are selling the trees in Israel as Christmas trees. So great, we got one. And there were so many people who wanted to come, we had to have two, back to back. Our house was packed. So I'm sitting there the first night, and there's a woman from the neighborhood, and she's just going, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm at a Christmas party. I can't believe it. What am I doing here? But she loved it. And then after we read all this stuff, and people were enjoying it, it was so interesting. And then one guy goes, wait a minute. Are you telling me the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem? Is that what you're saying? I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. That's what Micah is saying. That's our prophet, right? That's not the New Testament. No, we showed them that's, and you're saying, that what? How come we don't know this? I don't know, but that's, nobody told us this. How come we learned the Bible in school? Nobody taught us it. You, Joel, you should go to Naftali Bennett, the education minister. You should yell at him. You said, why? Why are you not teaching us this? Now, I didn't do that. Maybe I should. I haven't yet. I'm easing my way into the pool, but a lot of interest. So you just have to navigate sensitively, but the Lord can use just about anything, so even us. So one last question. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much again for teaching us this morning.
Sure.
My question, you talked about how the pool of those subscribing to radical Islam is continually growing, and my question is, can you address the means by which people are drawn in, and does economic oppression play a role in doing so?
By how they are drawn in?
Yes, how they're drawn into radical Islam, and the role the economic oppression may or may not play in that.
Economic oppression, okay. Well, I didn't say it's necessarily growing. I said it's actually fairly consistent between 7 and 10%, but that's such a huge number that the number of people that you can recruit from the pool into the specific organization to go operationalize that violent radical view, they seem to have a steady flow, and they're not having a problem recruiting. Wow, that's like a doctoral dissertation question, the first and the second, but the short version would be, and since our topic has been apocalyptic eschatology, let's just focus on this. Why would someone join a group to slaughter people in a genocidal fashion? Like, that's a sick idea. But the reason is because you believe one of two things. It really breaks down into two categories. One is you're really just a sick lunatic, and this is a way to go kill people for pay. Okay, so that there is, and this is, I would equate this in the Nazi era. These are brown shirts. Are they Nazis? They believe in the ideology of Hitler. Have they ever read it? They probably haven't. They just think this is a chance to go beat the crap out of Jews and even kill them. Great, I'm in. Where do I get my shirt? So there's that element. Okay, but the other element. Oh, I shouldn't probably have said that way. But anyway, okay. So forgive me. So it is Southwestern Baptist. Okay, I apologize. That's why I don't get invited to these things. Okay, sorry about that. So anyway, and it's being live streamed, so forgive me. Okay, I know not what I do. I did know, but I should have said. I apologize. Okay, the second part is why else would you do it? Because you're drawn to the sense this is it. This is the final battles. You believe the eschatology. You are motivated to give up your life, and more importantly, everybody else's life, because you believe you are in something much, much larger than yourself. And what you're watching in the world of Islamic and Arab and Persian, but mainly Arab, aggression is a change. What you had in the 20th century was nationalism. The PLO was the Palestine Liberation Organization as a nationalist movement, not an Islamist movement. Hamas is the Islamist movement. And Hamas is saying to Fatah, the core of main party within the PLO, you're not radical enough. You're a betrayer. You don't get it. You're losing to the Jews because you're not being faithful to Islam. So Hamas, now they're in trouble this week because they're like, oh, we're losing also, so they're not sure what to do, right? And Al-Qaeda, this is very fascinating, but I can't get into it right now, but there was a book written called The ISIS Apocalypse, by a wonderful scholar, not a Christian, not a Muslim, William McCants. Short version, he was able to bring together all the declassified letters that had been picked up off the battlefield in the Middle East between Osama bin Laden and the men that founded Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which became ISIS. And what's interesting is the dynamic is so interesting. Bin Laden is saying, these people are crazy. You cannot cut off someone's head and show it on television. This is bad for us. It doesn't help us. And besides, you're killing Muslims. What are you doing? And all this talk about the end of the world, come on, have some decaf. I mean, okay, I'm paraphrasing the way I said it, but Bin Laden thought they were crazy. But why is ISIS risen and Al-Qaeda seems to have vanished? Because what everybody keeps saying is the Arab secular nationalists, why did they keep losing to the Christians and the Jews? Because you weren't faithful to Islam. And then the Islamists said, we will be faithful to Islam. And then they were losing to the Christians and the Jews. And now the apocalyptic Muslims are saying, you're losing because you don't really, really believe. You don't believe this is the end of days and we're ushering in our king and our caliphate. You are all a bunch of wimps and we will show you how it's done. This draws people. And I would just say for us, I think weak, lame, kingdomless Christianity is pathetic. I mean, it may be true in the sense of the gospel. I don't question my brothers and sisters who believe in Jesus. But you take the glory of the coming of our King to make everything right. You take that out of Christianity, you can be a Christian, but you are missing what would motivate people to get out of their seats and go live for the Great Commission. And I'm not saying that everybody who doesn't really focus on the kingdom aren't faithful proclaimers of the gospel, but I am telling you, we're losing a generation of young people that do not understand that anything is exciting, dynamic, or time-sensitive about the gospel message. And I see prophecy, and it motivates me because I believe the clock is ticking, but I can't see the clock. I don't know how much time. So I have to live every day in a way that's faithful to the gospel and trying to motivate others to get in the game, share the gospel with Jews, with Muslims, with others, so that when you stand before Yeshua, whenever that is, by natural death, by rapture, whatever, you will really truly hear him say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. May you be faithful and fruitful. God bless you.